Bonjour, aujourd'hui je suis à Richhill Stud avec mon ami Vadamos. We've just seen Vadamos today and he's incredibly impressive. Can you tell me a little bit about his racing career in Europe?
Look, very interesting, Emily, because he started off, he didn't start off with Andre Fabre. Not many people realise that. He started off with a trainer called Francis Rohart, and he was placed in his only 2 starts at 2, and being by Monson, because they naturally assumed he would be a Derby horse, so they set him on a staying path, and he won a stakes race over 2200. And then as a 4-year-old, John Camilleri from Australia brought into the horse, and they changed stables and sent him to Andre Fabre, who we all know is one of the world's greatest trainers. And Andre said to the owner, look, this horse is actually a very fast horse, he's not a stayer, and he set him on a path, and he ended up winning the Group 1 mile in France.
Et c'est Vadamos, le numéro 2, qui enlève le premier groupe 1 de sa carrière dans ce Qatar près du Moulin de Longchamp.
And that Group 1 win, for you, what was so significant about that performance?
Oh, the turn of foot he showed. I mean, he just sat, you know, he sat on the pace, and they came around the turn, and he just ran away from them and dealt to them very easy. It was a very impressive win, and that sort of indicates what he did in all his Group 1s. He was, you know, a horse that could sit on the pace, but he also had that turn of foot to sprint away from them.
At what point then did he end up racing in Australia?
Well, John Camilleri, as I said earlier, actually brought into the horse after his 3-year-old career, and really, I think initially being by Monson, because Monson's won 3 of the last 4 Melbourne Cups, they thought he might be a Melbourne Cup horse, but of course he went on and became a Group 1 miler, and then he set him on a path he thought he'd like to bring him down and run him in the Cox Plate, so that's how he came to race in Australia.
And his performances were incredible, and he finished around some of the best in the world in that Cox Plate.
Yeah, exactly. Probably didn't quite see the true horse that day. I mean, I spoke to a leading Australian trainer about the horse before we brought into him, and he said he was in quarantine. Andre Fabre didn't come down and oversee his final preparation, and he was in quarantine and couldn't get anyone to gallop with him because he was such an impressive galloper. So he ended up going into that Cox Plate very fresh, and he actually had 3 changes of jockey. You may remember Joe Maero was supposed to come and ride him, and then there was a hurricane in Hong Kong, and then Damien Oliver got suspended, so he ended up the 3rd choice jockey. The horse just went in a bit fresh, and you remember he went out to a huge lead, and you just can't do that in those sort of races over 2,000 metres. But it performed very creditably. To hang on to 4th was a major effort, actually.
John Camilleri is obviously heavily involved in Vadamos himself. Can you tell me a little bit about him?
Yeah, well, look, it's really great to have a person of his profile in this horse. I mean, as I said to you earlier, he purchased half of the horse. He really believes in him. He's best known, of course, in Australia. Nowadays, he bred Winx and he bred Vancouver. He's got a lovely band of brood mares at Sedge Ho Stud, and he's sending you know, half a dozen of his lovely mares over here to support the horse. So, yeah, for us, it's a real positive, and he's talking the horse up big time in Australia, and you know, the Australians are very aware of the Monson blood, so we believe he'll be a very commercial horse come yearling sale time.
His breeding is really exceptional for New Zealand. Tell me, what does that offer to a New Zealand breeder?
Exactly. Well, look, he's by Monson, who of course needs no introduction. We all know that he sided 3 of the last 4 Melbourne Cup winners, and the one that he didn't win was won by Prince of Penzance by Pentai, but the horse that ran second was out of a Monson mare that not many people realise. So tremendous prowess there. But of course in Europe he's been a sensational sire, Monson, and you know, he's got that out of a beautiful Aga Khan family on his female side, and you know, out of a Pont Celeb mare. So a lot going for him on his pedigree side as well.
And it's quite a current family, isn't it?
Yeah, look, just this season alone, there's a horse out of a half-sister Monson's dam called the Pentagon, maiden O'Brien stable, a Galileo horse. He won his maiden by 7 lengths at the Curragh and the Tyros Stakes Group 3. He's currently the pre-post favourite for the Guineas and Derby for next year, so that's how impressive he was. But it's that sort of family that good horses could just bob up anytime.
And that cross with a Monsun and a Pentra Celebra has been pretty successful in the past as well.
That's right, Protectionist, who won the Melbourne Cup and won other races in Australia, is bred on the same cross.
The influence of Monsun in Australia has been significant in recent years and the rest of the world. That must be such an important thing for New Zealand to have access to that.
Yeah, well look, it was a few years ago I sort of delved into Monsun when he threw his first Melbourne Cup, when I'd never really heard of Monsun, and then I did some homework, and of course he won the Melbourne Cup the next year, and he was a very successful sire in Germany, probably the greatest sire ever. And in Germany they're quite a traditional breeding nation. They only serve small books. I think he only ended up with, in his whole career, with something like 900 foals. 12% of those foals were actually stakes winners, and of his runners, 17% of his runners were stakes winners. And you know, he sired horses that won Breeders' Cups all around the world. Even this year alone, the champion Japanese filly who won their champion Turo won the Japanese Oaks this year is out of a Monsun mare. The horse that won the French Derby, his mother is a half-sister to Monsun, and the horse that ran second's out of a Monsun mare. So when you delve into it, the horses, he's right up there with the likes of Northern Dancer, Galileo, Dane Hill as far as statistics go. You know, they love the turf, they love the firm tracks. Vadamos himself was best on a good track, and they just seem to cop the training. They keep going into their careers as sound, tough horses, which, you know, Germany's renowned for that. They're very selective on horses that they take into their breeding industry, and people may not realise that they won't allow any horse that's bled to stand there. The horse has to pass a confirmation criteria before they go to stud in Germany. So, you know, for what Monsun's achieved, you know, is quite incredible, really.
What mares do you think are going to suit Vadamos here in New Zealand?
Well, look, fortunately, he's an outcross for a lot of our great sire lines, and he's got that Nuriave coming through on the dam side that's clicked so well. So, you know, you immediately can say the Dane Hill line is going to be superb. The Zabeel line, you know, stallions like O'Reilly and Pentyre are going to suit him big time. So, you know, it's actually really exciting that virtually any pedigree in New Zealand you can breed to the horse. Look, we've been looking for a horse that's going to click with, you know, Pentyre mares, and if you look at two of Monsun's best stakes winners are out of Be My Guest mares, and of course Pentyre's by Be My Guest, and a lot of his stakes winners have Mill Reef in the pedigree, and Pentyre's out of a Mill Reef mare. So that was and physically he's going to suit them. He's such a big, impressive individual. So on type and pedigree he'll suit all them. So that's pretty exciting. You know, we've already put mares like Say No More, dual Group 1 winner by Pentyre, to go to him, and you know, he's got a lot of other support through the syndicate. I know Leon Casey was here and was very excited about him going with Darcy Brahma mares, and you know, that sort of thing. So yeah, he's really going to get some great support.
For people who haven't had the opportunity to see Vadamos in the flesh, can you just describe him to me physically?
Well, I think the big thing that strikes you as soon as you see this horse is his athleticism. You know, he just seems to float along the ground, beautiful quality head and a lovely shoulder. He stands deceptively tall. He's when you get alongside him, he's 16'1", but he's so well balanced and athletic, very, very correct and sound, as the Monsun progeny generally are. So, yeah, look, I don't think you could see a better individual, really.
So Vadamos is shuttling, of course, with Tally-Ho Stud and Island. How did the relationship come about with Tally-Ho?
Well, what actually happened was a guy from Australia called Peter O'Brien rang me. He runs Sedgenho Stud in Australia, and he said, we've got this horse coming down for the Cox Plate called Vadamos. He said, what do you think of him as a potential shuttle horse? And look, I delved into his pedigree and race record and actually got pretty excited about it, and rang back Peter, who looks after all John Camilleri's horses, who part own the horse. And then it came about, there were several leading New Zealand breeders went over to the Cox Plate and saw the horse, you know, including Greg Tomlinson from the Arkell Stud and Peter Valla, and they all decided, like I was thinking, that he'd be a great asset for the New Zealand industry. So, you know, it all came together. I had a ring from Andrew Seabrook to see what I thought of the horse, and having done all the homework, I think Andrew was quite impressed that I knew all about him, and that's how it all came about, and everything just came together so well. You know, it was a bit of a dream, really.
Vadamos qui va remporter cette épreuve nettement.
Fortunately, we have brought half of the horse, which is really important, because New Zealand breeders will always have access to him if he succeeds in both hemispheres, like we hope he will. And for me, that's very, very important. You know, there's nothing worse than putting all your time and effort into a stallion and then having him not come back. So yeah, we own 50% of him, the syndicate, the Monson Syndicate in Southern Hemisphere, and Tally Ho Stud own 50%.
Vadamos adds to a pretty impressive roster already here at Rich Hill. What do you think he's going to add to that?
Yeah, look, that was a very important factor in bringing the horse here. He does complement our other stallions so well, and of course the VRC were here last week with the Melbourne Cup because they wanted to come here, and they said, well, you've got a horse that's side a Melbourne Cup winner, you've got a horse that won a Melbourne Cup, and you've got Vadamos, who's by Monson. So from that perspective, it's great. But you know, as I alluded earlier, Bloodlines, he'll be a great asset to Pentime mares physically and pedigree-wise, and you know, he really does adds a different dimension to what we've got now, and doesn't detract at all from the other horses. They complement each other very well.
Graham and Linda Huddy's golden maroon silks are a familiar sight across the Tasman. They've raced 3 Derby winners, all conceived right here in New Zealand. Greg O'Connor sat down with Linda at their Peachester Lodge property south of the Sunshine Coast earlier this year.
Linda, away from the hustle and bustle of Group 1 race day, you have this beautiful property here of 135 acres.
We're so lucky to have this property. It was developed by earth movers, not ourselves. Everything is done perfectly well, the drainage, the levels. They put in a 1,600 metre grass track with a sand track on the inside. So we were lucky enough to buy it in 2009, and we have all ages here. We have our broodmares, so then we have the weanlings, yearlings, anything that races in New South Wales and Queensland comes back here to spell. And we do the pre-training the first 4 to 6 weeks before they go to the trainers. We don't bring the ones from Victoria, South Australia, it's a bit far to drag them back here. But I love having them nice and close.
How big is your thoroughbred operation now?
Oh, I suppose it's reasonably big just for 2 scrubbers from Mount Isa. We've got 3 main trainers now, I guess. Tony Gollan in Queensland, and Darren Weir in Victoria, and Tony McAvoy in South Australia. We'd always have 20 or so in work.
Talk to me about how you became involved in the racing industry.
Going back a long time, when I first left school, I was okay at school, but nothing great. And some of my friends at school had horses, so I used to go and help them with them. And when I left school, Mum said, why didn't I try getting a job at a horse stud? And yeah, just fell in love with the racing, mares, foals. Couldn't think of anything better.
And then you got to hang out with one of the greats of all time, JB Cummings.
That's true. I was great working for Bart in Adelaide. I had a bit to do with a lot of good horses, Melbourne Cup winners, Think Big, won it twice, Golden Black. Another great horse Bart had, Lord Dudley.
And another trainer, C.S. Hayes, and he had a pretty smart one there too that you rode on a few occasions.
Yeah, C.S., obviously everyone knows Stulcify. I used to ride him when he was a young horse, even before he had a name probably, and then up until he showed them how good he was, and then, yeah, we didn't, my track work rider and we didn't get to ride him so often then.
What about your husband Graham? How did you meet him, and where does his passion, where does it come from?
He's probably had more to do with horses over his lifetime than I did. He was brought up on a cattle station up in the Gulf of Carpentaria, so he learnt to ride early, did a lot of mustering. I went to Mount Isa in the end of '81 after I'd worked at Lindsay Park for about 4 or 5 years, and I'd worked as a strapper then for about 10 years or so, and I might have just got a bit sick of the early mornings, and it gets awfully cold in the Barossa in winter. CS said he'd give me a job in the office at Lindsay Park if I learnt office work and things. So there was a couple of months to fill in before I could do a course to learn all that. And I thought, oh, I'll come up to Mount Isa and then go back and get the job in the office at Lindsay Park. And it was funny actually, I asked for Peter Hayes for reference when I was coming up, going up to Mount Isa, because I wanted to work while I was there. And he said, you won't come back. You'll go up there, meet a miner, that'll be the end of you. I said, no, I'll be back. Anyway, met Graham up there, and yeah, the rest is history now.
Monton's in front, Shootout's got a lunge on the outside, he lunged quickly, he might have got there in the last hop. Photo, Shootout on Monton.
I want to talk about some of these stars of yours and Shootout. What attracted you to him as a yearling? Because there's got to be a story behind this.
He was sold the year after we had EI in Australia. All the sales had been changed from their usual dates, so Magic Millions was at Easter instead of Inglis being at Easter. We could only go for the first 2 days. We were just looking for, as everyone does, a good horse. So I saw this horse by High Chaparral, and he'd been born in Queensland, even though I know he's a New Zealand product. And he was by High Chap, first season sire, a bit of a stayer, and I can remember saying to Graham, this horse won't be very dear because no one will want a stayer, but he's cutest. We went and had a look at him at the sales, nice enough, a bit weak in the hocks. And I said, I think he'll be cheap. I didn't think he'd be that cheap. So
$15,000 cheap.
Plus GST.
Plus GST.
GST.
We must remember that, considering you just over $3 million.
3.2.
Yeah. So he was originally with John
Wallace at the Gold Coast.
And then
yeah. And John always told us he was going to be good, but you know trainers.
And then ended up with Chris Waller.
Yeah, because after he won the Derby in Sydney, obviously, you know, he wasn't going to race in Queensland that often, and he had a few problems, and Chris had Rangi do then and done really well with him because Rangi had a few problems. Because he'd had 6 months off because of his back problems, and we weren't sure whether he'd get back to the races, and we thought if Chris thought he could, we'd go with Chris. So.
Ended up taking you on an amazing journey. What did you get, 5 Group 1s?
5 Group 1s, yeah.
You retired to here, to this property,
Yep.
but you had a pretty sad occasion earlier in the year.
Yeah, he's turned out he had a tear in his diaphragm that you obviously don't know. He had the symptoms of colic, and they put him on the table, and yeah, his heart just stopped. So wasn't fair.
No.
Should still be here, anyway.
He did you proud though. His racetrack performances aside,
he was such a beautiful natured horse. Yeah, didn't deserve that. He was a real gentleman.
And the field looks right to run. The Amy Victoria Derby. They're off.
Linda, Preferment, how did you get involved with him?
That was through Chris Waller. Chris, everyone knows the horses from Europe that Chris buys, and of course they're getting more and more expensive now, those proven good stayers. So Chris and Guy Mulcaster decided they'd go to New Zealand and buy a group of stayers. He got a group of his owners together. You were in that group, you had all the horses. So I think the first year they bought 6 or 7, and Preferment was one of them.
But Preferment and Bondiga are flying home. It's Preferment and Bondiga racing to the lead together. Preferment on the outside. Ollie's done it again.
very good horse. Bit frustrating early in his career. He kept getting beaten by not much, and that's so he was still a maiden going into the Derby, but I mean, he shouldn't have been.
Did that make that Victoria Derby, I suppose, more special?
I think it did, yeah, and I think for Chris it did.
Turnbull Stakes, Australian Cup and the BMW.
Yeah.
Amazing career.
Yeah, good trainer, good horse, good jockey.
Preferment in a bobbing go, maybe Preferment just.
He's now going to stud.
Yes.
What do you think he'll bring as a stallion to his stock? What do you think will be the standout features?
Well, one thing, temperament. Everyone, you know, it really helps a racehorse to be calm and sensible, and he's quite a sensible horse. He's got the looks, and I know that doesn't make them run faster, but he's a beautiful looking animal, and good pedigree, and obviously good ability, so I'm pretty sure he should make it as a stallion. I'd like to get a Derby winner by him, that'd be good.
And now Odeon moving up, but Volatile Mix went with it.
Volatile Mix. You better point us in the right direction how this all came about.
He's very badly named, as it turns out. We bought a High Chaparral mare after she'd been placed in a stakes race in New Zealand for the Queensland Oaks. She did run in it, but she didn't do very well, and then she went for a spell, and when she came back she had a few problems, so she only had a couple more starts and we retired her. And because she was by High Chaparral and shootouts by High Chaparral out of a Pentie mare, we thought we'd send her to Pentie, so it was a reverse cross. So we got this nice colt, and I was going to call him something like Upside Down or Back to Front or the other way round or something. Anyway, I couldn't think of anything that I liked with that. And whenever I'd talk to people about him and they'd look at his pedigree by Pentie, who we know they can be a little bit different, and High Chaps, everyone knows they're a bit different, and Zabeel can be a bit touchy sometimes, and they go, ooh, that's a tricky cross. So we called him Volatile Mix, but it's definitely not him, he's so quiet.
Tell me about his racetrack career so far.
Darren always said, we're going to win the South Australian Derby with this horse. So ran well his first few starts. Then he might have been a little bit disappointing in a couple, but he did have, as a young horse, felt his joints a bit. He's started in the South Australian Derby at a good price, which I was a bit surprised with Darren Weir's record, and I thought the horse's lead-up run was quite good. But anyway, he flew under the radar a bit and won.
Since filming, Volatile Mix has been sold to Hong Kong interests, and we look forward to following his career over there. Meanwhile, Preferment arrived at Nick and Anne-Marie King's Bright Hill property in July, and he's proving pretty popular with Kiwi breeders.
The interest has been great, and he's such a high quality horse that gets people to the farm, and as you can see with the footage you've got today, he's a beautiful horse. So once they see him, they tend to love him. Thankfully they book in, and the good thing is they tell all their friends, and so we've had a lot of interest.
Tell me a little bit about his ownership. I understand some of his original owners are still in him?
Yeah, it's basically the ownership model. He is syndicated and we are selling shares in him, but the main owners are three of the original owners that raced him. So we've got Debbie Capitas, who of course everybody knows, who races Winx, is having a very exciting time at the moment. But also we've got Graham and Linda Huddy, who are fantastic supporters of New Zealand Thoroughbreds and have been for a long time, and very enthusiastic, and then Francis and Christine Cook as well. They realise the long-term thing with the stallion. They're excited to be involved in it. As I mentioned, they are super enthusiastic about New Zealand Thoroughbreds, and that's why the stallion is here. Yes, and they're all sending mares to him that will total between the three of them probably about 25 mares. So that's going to be a great basis for him. And now we've got other shareholders coming on board. It's going to give him a hell of a start and keep him moving along through those second and third years.
What do you think is going to make him a really good stallion?
Oh, it's so obvious. He's one of those ones you don't have to dig deep. When you got a 4-time Group 1 winning son as Zabeel, you really are on the front foot. So, and particularly the way he looks, he's such a lovely athletic horse. I think that's thing which completes the package. I think those middle distance and staying races that he won, you know, we're all very realistic about the quality of those now, and not only are they racing against Australasian horses, but also of course the best from Europe.
And can you tell me a little bit how he's going to suit the mares here in New Zealand?
As you can see, physically he's in the mould of Zabeel, and with the Zabeel sire line that he's got there, that opens up a lot of possibilities for him. A lot of families that have had success with Zabeel and Zavabeel can use him. And then of course he does mirror a little bit what Zavabeel's done, because he's got a speed source on his dam side. He's got the Flying Spur and Canny Lad, which is that Australian speed source. So he really will suit the New Zealand mares physically and pedigree-wise, which is why he's here. And everybody was aware of that, I think, the whole way through his race career. Once he had won his Derby and was going to be a stallion, the place for him to stand was New Zealand.
Now let's get off to Aden for this week's edition of Kiwi Bred News.
Thanks, Emily. With the abandonment of the second half of Saturday's Group 1 Livermore Classic meeting at Hastings, the Group 2 Sacred Falls Hawke's Bay Guineas took top billing of races in New Zealand. And it was the Christopher Grace-bred Burgundy gelding Hard Merchandise who stocked up with another stakes win. Leading throughout for jockey Cameron Lammis, the Gary Vile-trained Hard Merchandise fetched $38,000 as a yearling at New Zealand Bloodstock's select session last year through the draft of Whited Upper's Little Avondale stud. A winner of the listed Castletown Stakes last season, Hard Merchandise joins Group 3 Gold Trail Stakes winner Dijon Bleu as stakes winners for Burgundy already this season. He defeated the Jimmy Shoe youngsters Bostonian and Jimmy Lincoln. Westbury stud stallion Reliable Man has claimed the first stakes win of his siring career with the success of Group 2 UCI Stakes winner Main Stage. The Trent Busserton and Natalie Young trained Main Stage was a $150,000 ready-to-run sale purchase for Mike and Adele Kneebones Patella Bloodstock from the draft of Kilmore Farm at Karaka last year. The Reliable Man 3-year-old will have one further lead-up to next month's Group 1 Victoria Derby. Another stakes winner in Melbourne on Saturday was the shocking gelding Pure Pride, who won the listed Paris Lane handicap at Flemington, while in Hong Kong on Sunday night, former Cambridge galloper 50-50 indicated he was headed to the top grades with another smart win, this time in Class 2 company. The Thorne Park colt was bred by the Shaw family and sold through the draft of Inglewood stud for $75,000 at the 2014 New Zealand Bloodstock Select Yearling Sale, beginning his career with a Te Aroha win for Cambridge trainer Lauren Brennan. A recurring fetlock injury has ended the career of Capella. The Gary Harding bred and raced Rip Van Winkle 5-year-old has flown to Australia with a tentative booking to Arrowfield stud stallion Snitzel. 2014 Singapore Horse of the Year War of Fear will return to New Zealand to spell for the next 6 months. Connections are hoping the son of O'Reilly can recover from his well-documented wind issues with the break. That's it for Kiwi Bred News this week. We'll leave you with a look at the foals of Mapley Stud's first season sire, Complacent.